Welcome into the Slobberknocker Sports College Football Show. It is Wednesday, November 27th. I am your host, Dylan Leak, joined as always by my man, Uncle T. And we have a special guest back on the show, returning for the second time. Michelle, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, so happy to be back with you guys talking college football again, especially in this very, very special week.
Yes, fun week, a lot of good matchups. We're going to talk about that, college football playoff picture, all that stuff. Hopefully we get the same numbers on our last video, because I think you are our most watched video by far.
Oh yeah, Michelle, big time star power.
Good to know.
Yeah. Let's jump into some of the college football playoff rankings. So I wanted to discuss kind of like, I guess we'll start with this. I'll ask you this, Michelle. Which teams do you think, based on the rankings, based on resumes and all of that and what's left, which teams do you think are in regardless of what happens on Friday and Saturday in the conference championships?
Definitely Oregon. There's no doubt about that. I think Oregon could even lose the next two and still be in. I don't think they will, but I think Oregon's definitely in. Ohio State is likely in the same spot. I think the Michigan game makes it really interesting just because Michigan's so bad. but having dropped one already to Oregon, if they don't make the Big Ten championship, maybe it gets dicey. And then I think Miami's in. I think it would be unlikely, based on where Miami is currently positioned, to see Miami fall all the way out, just because they need some reasonable representative from the ACC. And I think Miami's probably in the best spot to do that. So those are the three I think that are pretty much locks. The rest I think are up in the air, but curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that too.
I'm curious, do you think Texas is in, even because Texas one loss? They're the only team left in the SEC with one loss. If they lose to A&M, they would not play in the SEC championship, which means at most they could have two losses. Do you think there's a possibility they wouldn't get in if they got killed in College Station on Saturday night?
They got killed in College Station. I think there is a chance, just because a lot of people I've heard really doubt Texas's strength of schedule. They missed a lot, other than Georgia, a lot of the real quote-unquote juggernauts who don't look like much of juggernauts this season of the SEC. So I think there would be people arguing to keep Texas out, but realistically, based on the brand power, they're I would say as close to a lock as possible, pending some disaster. And again, we might get into a Jordan Travis situation, depending on if I heard Ewers might not be healthy, something happens to Arch, I don't know.
That's a good point. I would, obviously, if Quinn went down, but they still had Arch, I think they'd be fine in terms of perception. But yeah, if Quinn didn't play in that game and Arch had to play and he got hurt, then absolutely now you're having that same discussion, because they are going to be, if they were to lose in College Station, I think and I'm a big Texas fan, if they were to lose in College Station by 2-3 scores and there's an injury, I think that's the only way they miss, especially with some of the other SEC teams picking up a third loss this last weekend. They want to have as many SEC teams in as they can. It's going to be hard to make an argument for a 2-loss SEC team. And I agree with your point about the strength of schedule. It's awful. The only good team they played that ended up being solid is Georgia, and they got steamrolled. So, but I agree. I would say Oregon, Ohio State are most likely in. I think Texas is going to get in, unless Penn State would have to slip up to Maryland. They're a 24.5 point favorite. I picked Minnesota to beat Penn State last week, and they damn near did. It was very, very dicey down the wire there. But I would say,
even if Penn State loses to Maryland, I still think they're going to put them in.
You think
personally,
as a 24.5 favorite?
Listen, their only other loss is to Ohio State in a very close game. They should have probably won. Obviously, James Franklin loses everything against good teams in close games. That's what he does. But if they got blown out by Maryland, sure, which isn't going to happen. But if they lost by a touchdown or a field goal to Maryland, being two losses and having that slip up and only lost to Ohio State, I think they got a lot of help with a lot of these SEC teams having their third loss, because I just don't. I'm not a Big Ten guy. I'm not, but I just, with a two-loss Penn State with one of those losses being to Ohio State, I still think they're going to end up putting them in over a 3-loss. Who knows? They're trying to get Alabama in there as hard as they can. Someone was laughing someone was laughing when they were right there behind Clemson. It was like, so they're trying to get Alabama in here somehow. They'll end up getting it done.
I think Big Cat tweeted about that. He was like, Bama's going to get in, aren't they? They're going to find a way to put them in that playoff. Like they want to. Okay, well, on that point, then I'll ask Michelle, who do you think with a win this weekend at least is in no matter what?
I think Tennessee's got a pretty good shot based on where they're currently ranked. Vanderbilt would not typically be viewed as an impressive win, except to the extent that they did beat Bama and they kept it close to Texas too. I think they've made themselves like a pretty respectable, live SEC team. It would be a credible win for Tennessee, more so than in recent years. I think Notre Dame also probably a shoo-in if they can hold on against USC. That's not a given though. I mean, it's not a given that they win. I think if they win, they're in. But otherwise, hard to say. Indiana, Penn State, I was going to say they need to probably be successful going forward if they want to be assured a spot, especially given, I think, some of the signals of SEC bias that we're seeing. And then I think Boise State, too, does need a win. I don't think they're a lock. I know their only loss is to Oregon, but with so many SEC teams and Big Ten teams in the mix, and the fact they have to try to include some Big 12 teams and just the chaos that is the Big 12 right now, I don't think they're going to really be, fighting to reserve spots for G5 teams right now.
Yeah, I agree.
I was going to say the real interesting one to me scenario is, okay, say SMU and Miami, they play in the ACC title game, right? They have SMU is 9 right now. If they lose that game to Miami in a close game, and listen, I probably already know what the committee is going to do, but if they lose to Miami in a close game, how do you have a 2-loss SMU team? And like I said, you should not get penalized for playing in your conference championship game.
Well,
it's absurd.
This is the next question, and after you finish, I want Michelle's take on this as well. I think she answered it by saying Miami's in already, but I want to hear it. And I agree. It's the question of, should you be penalized for losing in a conference championship?
Yeah.
Is the question. And then A, and B, will you? Because should you and will you are two completely different things.
Yeah, I just think with SMU, they're going to screw SMU. If SMU beats Miami, and I know Miami's 3 spots ahead of them in the rankings, right? But if SMU beats them, like Michelle said, Miami's going to get in because it's Miami. But if SMU loses a close game in the ACC championship game, it's absolute bullshit in my mind that they put Alabama in. I think they will put Alabama in over them, but I just think that that's not right. I just don't know how you penalize a team for losing the extra game. It goes back to what Lane Kiffin said, where he's talking to these SEC coaches, and they say, listen, we don't really – now, of course, Lane now, after picking up that loss in Florida, would love to play in the SEC championship game. But before, it's like, hey, we would rather be a 2-loss SEC team, in their minds, beat the shit out of Indiana, no disrespect to the Big Ten, but kill Indiana and have an easier road in the college football playoff than having to play an SEC championship game, get beat up, and have a bye and have a worse – and you're playing a neutral site game? It just doesn't make any sense. So in my mind, if we're playing for a bye, which should be, a reward for these teams, a conference championship game, you cannot penalize a loss unless someone gets the wheels blown off, doors blown off them by 40 points. You can't penalize a loss.
Yeah, it really depends, right? I would generally agree with you that you shouldn't penalize a loss. I think it depends on where you were positioned coming in, though. And what I hate about the SMU Miami conversation, because I think you're dead on, is that if you look at, they each have 1 loss, right? And their 1 losses were to similarly competitive programs. I mean, arguably SMU's loss to BYU is better than Miami's loss to Georgia Tech, right? Look at the way those programs perform throughout the season, and yet Miami is going to get way, way more of the benefit of the doubt, even though Miami was also in a lot more super close games that it could have lost, but for the grace of the officiating crews.
Yep.
So I think, to your point, like in that situation, you should not be penalized at all. But if you're coming in some of these like look at the Big 12, right? Like it's been a massacre. A lot of these teams are coming in with several losses already, and then you add to that, like you're not necessarily being penalized for losing the conference championship, but it is cumulative with the losses you had coming into it. And so if you wouldn't have been eligible but for playing in the conference championship game, I think the loss can kind of be decisive. But if otherwise you would have been eligible and then a loss knocks you out, then I think that's a problem, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like the difference would be like A&M. If A&M beats Texas this week, they'd be in the SEC title game. A loss in the SEC title game would affirm that they're not making it anyway. It wouldn't affect it. But if it's an SMU or Miami and they lose and they're positioned in the top 11 and then they get knocked out, that's the problem. And they said, I was looking at it, they said last night in the rankings, they had the chairman on and they asked him about it. And he said, quote, "We value teams that make the championship. It is a value to us, but we've been asked by the commissioners to rank the teams all the way through the championship weekend." I think that's a cop-out, and I think that they're using that because if Georgia loses in the SEC title game, they're in. They're never leaving Georgia out. They're not going to penalize them, and they're using that language to affirm that. But like y'all said, if SMU loses in the ACC championship, they're absolutely going to try and take them out, and they can still use the exact same criteria because they don't really have a rule on it, which is my issue with this. I wish they would come out and say, you should disregard a loss in the conference championship. You're only looking at the resume of the first 12 games, aside from the automatic bids, right? That's how I feel about it.
Well, and then you throw in the Jordan Travis principle, and it becomes even riskier to play in one of these conference title games, because if you're just sitting at home watching, nobody's getting injured, right? Like your big stars are not going down, but every additional game you play, especially this late in the season, is an opportunity for one of your players to go down. And as we've seen before, the committee is not kind. And if they want to disqualify you on that basis, they 100% will. And so again, Lane Kiffin is not wrong. I have other issues with Lane Kiffin, but he's not wrong about that one.
Oh, come on. He's turning his life around. He's not even drinking anymore. It's sober Lane Kiffin. No, but going back to SMU real quick, Dylan. So you have SMU at 9, right? Then you have Clemson waiting at 12. I mean, Clemson should, if SMU plays in the ACC championship game, they should never jump SMU ever under any. I don't even care if they lose by 30. I don't care. If they play that game after being more dominant than Miami the whole year, I mean, they lost a very close, ugly game to BYU. Miami should have lost to Cal, should have lost to VT. If we had a universal national officiating base instead of ACC officials in the replay, in the replay center, they would have for sure lost to Virginia Tech, because there's no way after watching that replay you could go, yes, without a reasonable doubt that the guy didn't catch the ball. So anyway, it's interesting to see what they're going to do. But if they screw SMU, I'd be pretty pissed off. And I'm not even an SMU fan. But
Michelle, do you think if SMU loses, do you think they'll leave them out? And if so, who would they put in, Clemson or Alabama?
It would be, as you pointed out, Dylan, remarkable to have Clemson leapfrog them when they weren't even playing in the conference title game. But that's what they're signaling right now, right? Like Clemson is positioned to jump with a win over South Carolina, which I think the committee would rightly view as impressive. Like South Carolina has peaked late. But that being said, I think they would probably still have a preference for Alabama, just based on some of Alabama's quality of wins, right? That Georgia win is going to be huge for Alabama. They're going to be leaning on that till the end of time, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all they've got after last week. I mean, that's my problem with it, is like to lose in that manner, to put up 3 points against Oklahoma. In my opinion, any other team would have dropped out of the top. They would have been like 20 or 19 or 20. if that name is not Alabama, they're not sitting at whatever. What are they, 14 or 15? Like they're never sitting
14.
there.
I think Clemson's 13. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're never sitting at 14 if that name is SMU. Like that's SMU, right? Like you lose that game like that, that's never happening. So quickly here, I'm gonna just go through some of these scenarios and get your take on these, and then we'll jump into some big game breakdowns. So I guess the SEC we don't have to talk about because we're going to jump into A&M Texas in a minute. But the whole scenario for that is the simplest one. Georgia's in, and the winner of Texas and Texas A&M will play for the SEC title. So we'll talk about that big game breakdown here in a minute and see who we think in that game. We kind of mentioned the ACC already. SMU is already in no matter what happens this weekend. Miami is in with a win, and they are an 11-point favorite at Syracuse. Clemson is a 2.5-point favorite against South Carolina. I guess I'll just ask you this quickly, both of you guys. Is there any way Miami loses this game at Syracuse, or are they going to win and get in and make this pretty simple?
I think there's always a way for Miami to lose, but more often than not, they find a way to win.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty confident that they're going to take care of this one. I think their focus is going to be in the right place. I think a lot of teams slept on Georgia Tech this year. Miami was one of them.
I mean, in Miami, keep in mind, lost that game to Georgia Tech, and I like Cameron Ward, so I'm not a Miami fan, but I'm a Cameron Ward guy. With him playing Incarnate Word, Miami lost that game to Georgia Tech, and Haynes King couldn't throw the ball. He couldn't throw the ball. He was throwing the ball. He was 4 for 4, and it just when he was on the field, you knew it was coming. It was like, and they did it. They had a fantastic game plan. They milked the clock. They kept the ball out of Miami's hands. It worked. It was like almost running the triple option, but they threw it fewer times than Army in a game. But when it comes to Miami, like you said, there's always a chance they lose. I do think they'll find a way to win this week against Syracuse. An okay Syracuse team, but I'm sure it'll be dicey. I can't imagine them just winning the game by 21 points. They don't do it. It'll be interesting. They'll find a way to win.
Or the officials will find a way to win it for them.
Exactly.
And we'll get into the other part of that equation in a second in our big game breakdowns. Clemson, South Carolina, we'll touch on a little bit. Big Ten is simple as well. Oregon's in. Ohio State is in with a win. Penn State would need a win versus Maryland and an Ohio State loss to Michigan. And then Indiana's only path is a win versus Purdue and then a Penn State and Ohio State loss. That would be their path. So, I mean, we're going to talk about Ohio State, Michigan here in a minute. Now, the most interesting one here to me is the Big 12. And I looked this up and it made my head hurt. There are so many possibilities here. It's ridiculous. So there are actually 9 teams that still have a mathematical chance of winning the Big 12, and yet not a single one of those 9 teams controls their own destiny in some. I don't know how that's possible, but it is. There's 256 possible outcomes of different winners and how they could play out going into the. So I'm not even going to get into that, but essentially we know this. We know that if Iowa State and Arizona State both win, Arizona State plays at Arizona, and Iowa State plays home against Kansas State, which is a much shorter line. That line's like 2.5. If they both win, that's the most likely outcome at that point would be those 2 teams. There's still a very real possibility that it's not those 2. But here's my question to you, Michelle. They talked about this. I brought this up to Turner a week ago, and they talked about it actually last night on the College Football Playoff show. I forgot who brought it up. There is a legitimate possibility that a Big 12 team could win the conference championship with 3 losses. So if Colorado were to somehow sneak in, they'd have 3 losses. If a wild set of circumstances happens and one of the 3 loss teams gets in and wins that game, there is Tulane sitting there at 17. There is no rule in this new playoff that says it has to be a Power 5 team. It's the highest 4 rated conference champions get the bye. The 5th gets the 12 seed. Do you think it's realistically possible if a 3-loss Big 12 team wins that conference that we could see the Big 12 left out entirely?
It depends who it is. Like a 3-loss Colorado team is not going to be left out.
Yeah.
When we remember what this actually is, which is an economic and entertainment endeavor, we're not leaving Colorado out with 3 losses, especially if they're trying to tell us right now that one of these 3-loss SEC teams is going to get in.
Great point.
They're not going to leave out an entire conference champion with 3 losses is my view. Unless it is one that they really dislike.
Unless it's unless it's BYU, like she's saying. If it's like BYU, if it's BYU instead of Colorado, if it's a 3-loss Colorado, I just, like she said, I get why you would do it. I get it, but it sets a very, I think the Big 12 will be absolutely irate, first of all. And it's like, okay, we're going to leave our champion out for fucking Tulane. I get it. I know that Tulane's playing good ball right now, but if it's Colorado, they're not getting left out for Tulane. It's just not going to happen. I just don't see it.
Both of y'all are right. It's very unlikely that they're going to leave Colorado with that name, with Dion, with Travis Hunter, who's going to win the Heisman, whether that's right or not. Yeah, Colorado. But yeah, like you said, BYU. It's funny. BYU. You're saying BYU could get left out with 3 losses. They actually, in my opinion, they have the best win of any of the Big 12 teams. They went and won at SMU earlier this year. That's by far the best win of any of those Big 12 teams. So I don't know. Going to be interesting to see how it plays out. The other two quickly, and I'll just say these real quick, and then we'll go to big game breakdowns. American is already set. It's Tulane and Army. So winner of that will be the American champ. And like I said, Tulane's the only one who would have a legitimate shot. Their only way they would get in is if somehow with a Big 12 3-loss team got left out, or if Boise State were to lose in that conference title game, it would come down to them or UNLV, assuming UNLV beats Boise for that 5th spot. And then the Mountain West is going to be Boise and UNLV unless UNLV slips up against Nevada this week. All right, let's jump into some big game breakdowns. Michelle, are my Texas Longhorns going to win this weekend in College Station? They're 5.5-point favorites. I'm a little bit nervous, not going to lie.
I'm less nervous for you. I think they win and they cover. I feel pretty good about it. I really do. I think, honestly, that 5.5-point line is giving a lot of credit to Kyle Field.
Absolutely.
If I have to be honest, because Texas, I think, on a neutral site is better than a 5-point favorite against this A&M. This feels a little bit similar to me to that line we saw in the Red River shootout, right?
Yep.
Where they recognize it's a rivalry. And this is not just a rivalry. I mean, this game has been building for years. It is going to be so beautiful and intense. And I think that the 5.5-point spread reflects that. And yet, when you look at what Texas does well and the way they want to play and how A&M has looked, I really like Texas in this spot. I know one of the things that struck me about this A&M team is they've really struggled against mobile quarterbacks. And I don't think we're going to see that, right? For a couple of reasons. One is if Ewers plays, I think he's got some ankle problems. And if Arch plays, I don't think they want to risk Arch getting injured. But Texas still has excellent pass protection, and A&M secondary has not been good. I think when I looked it up, they're like 81st in passing yards allowed. Like, I think whoever is QB is going to be able to kind of dice up that A&M secondary. So, and then Texas's defense, right? That's the flip side of this, is that Texas defense has just looked pretty dang solid. I think A&M doesn't quite have its quarterback situation figured out. They're kind of, oscillating between 2 above average, but not great quarterbacks. And you can't do that against this Texas defense. So I like Texas to win. I like Texas to cover, but tell me why you're nervous.
Well, I'm just nervous because I'm neurotic and I'm a huge Texas fan and I can't stand A&M. Like, I hate them with an absolute burning passion.
You should have seen him during the all. I mean, you would have thought his life was on the line. He didn't have any money on the game. You would have thought his life was on the line watching A&M and Auburn the other day. Okay. He was like standing up, like in a I mean, he was just losing his mind. Look, this is the one thing I'll say for people that are outside of the state of Texas that don't realize this. The biggest football rivalry is obviously Michigan, Ohio State. That's number 1. Number 2 in the country, and I'm telling you, it's not even close, is Texas and Texas A&M. It's people that are outside of the state of Texas think, oh, it's the Red River rivalry, and that's a big game. This game is far, far bigger. That's why the line's this way. Obviously, Texas on a neutral site, neutral field, probably 8, 8.5. Dylan thinks maybe even a 10-point favorite.
10.
Who knows?
10.
Big favorite. But in Kyle Field, 13 years ago, it's been 13 years since Justin Tucker hit the walk-off there. This game has been – you should see the ticket prices for this game. I was going through ESPN, and I know people that are going to the game, but it's like, Michigan, Ohio State, obviously it's a down year, but like tickets from $300, Nashville, Tennessee, and Vandy, pretty big game. They don't like each other, $300. The cheapest tickets, I think, for like UT A&M are in the $600 to $700 ballpark for the rafters of Kyle Field. I mean, it's a huge, huge game. If A&M wins, they go to the SEC championship. I don't think they're going to win. I think Texas wins this game. The one thing I will say is I get that Texas is a better team. There's no question about that. I would be shocked if it's a blowout either way. I just don't see it happening. A&M's not going to blow them out. In Texas, Quinn, although Quinn's my guy, Dylan hates me that I like Quinn Ewers, but I think he's fine. I think they're better. I think they're better off with Arch Manning playing. That was never going to happen. It's going to be a close game. I'm going to go Texas. We're going to go back 13 years. Texas with a walk-off field goal to win it again.
Okay. Well, as long as they win, I don't care about how many it is and what manner, what happens. But why I am nervous, most of all, aside from me being a crazy Texas fan, is I just don't trust Quinn Ewers this year. I know he's had games, and numbers-wise, completion percentage-wise, he looks good on paper. If you watch every snap like I do, there's a stretch in every single game where you just scratch your head and you're like, what are you doing? It happened in the Kentucky game where he had just thrown a horrible interception that got returned for a touchdown. The next play, he dropped the snap, picked the ball up, and threw it behind the line of scrimmage 11 yards for a negative play. And all of a sudden, that game got a little bit tight. That should have never been tight. It's why Texas failed to cover against Arkansas. And look, you brought up some really good points. I think this could come down to a question of, can they protect Quinn Ewers? And Texas is graded out, according to Pro Football Focus, as the number one offensive line in pass blocking in the country. And A&M has the 8th ranked pass rushing defense in the country, according to PFF. So I'm sorry, 8th in the SEC. So they are not a great pass rushing.
I was going to say, they're pretty low. I checked out the number of sacks to see if they'd be able to get any penetration. They're not great. I think they have 23 sacks on the season.
Right.
So
right. And if you look at the one game Texas lost, what happened? Georgia mauled Texas up front. Everybody thought Texas had the best offensive line in the country going into that game, and Georgia used its 5 stars and said, "Not so fast, my friend." And that's what happened. Quinn couldn't even get the ball out. They tried Arch for a couple series. That was ugly as could be. So if they can protect Quinn Ewers and let him deliver the ball, Sark is going to scheme up open receivers. Finally, Isaiah Bond is healthy. Finally, Matthew Golden is healthy. When that receiving core is fully healthy, they're really elite in space. Sark's going to put them in space, and A&M's outside the top 100 in tackling. So to me, this is a bad matchup. Like Turner said, could Kyle Field at night? And like you said, I agree. I think that's 100% what the number is. Like I said, the number, I thought I'd make this 10 on a neutral. So this is the rivalry. This is Kyle Field at night. But to that point, Kyle Field at night might be the toughest place to play, other than like LSU at night. I mean, it's up there. It's top 5. It's an incredibly difficult place to play, especially this late in the season, especially in a rivalry game. I'm going to say Texas wins and covers because I'm a Horn, but I would say it's going to be 27-17. That's my guess here. It's not going to be super high scoring.
I would say that's about right. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a very high scoring game either. And Dylan is a coward and wanted to play this game at 2:30 at Kyle Field. He thought that should have been a 2:30 game.
Like, how many night games do you get? How many night games does A&M get every single? It's ridiculous. Let them make them play during the day.
That's what happens. Them and LSU, when you have the best environment, you get to host the night games. You got I know Lane Kiffin wants them at the SIP, and it's like, no, they're drinking in the Grove at 9 a.m. But yeah, no, they don't get
here. Ohio State fans whine about this. They are so mad at Fox for making all of their games at noon. They're furious. My take on this is that stadium looks like a toilet seat, and Montpelier looks like a toilet seat, but it's still a toilet seat. So
yeah, it does. And once again, you said this is a business, and you got to look at the economics behind it. And the Big Ten they don't want any part of challenging an SEC night game for Ohio State to play at night. They could care less. You're going to be the big game, 11 o'clock Fox every week when you're playing anybody relevant. That's just the way it's going to be.
Let's dive into that rivalry, Ohio State, Michigan. We're sitting at a pretty big number here. Ohio State's a 21-point favorite. I know you're not going to pick against the Wolverines, Michelle. You said that last time. You never pick against them. Do you truly believe that Michigan has a shot here? Can you make a case for them?
I can make a case for anything.
Okay,
that's really my profession. I will say some advantages Michigan has going into this game are, number one, mentality. Like, Michigan is in a perfect spot mentally because they are bowl eligible. So that's great. But they are not playoff eligible. So this is house money. They don't have to look forward to anything else. They don't have to save anything else. They can put it all on the table here. And they're not nervous. They're just excited. And I think Ohio State, by contrast, has a lot to lose, right? They still have to play the Big Ten championship game. They get there, they're going to have to make their way through a very lengthy playoff process to try to achieve their goal of winning a national title. I think they're going to have to play, and they're going to hate it, but I think they may have to play more conservatively versus Michigan, who really can just give it their best game. And I think Ohio State's got some physical vulnerabilities right now, especially on the O-line. Now, it didn't show up as much against Indiana to the extent I thought it would, but Michigan has got some different guys on that defensive front. Graham and Grant are not to be messed with. And I think they're going to be hungry. I think they will be able to get some penetration. So we'll see what happens. I worry most about Michigan's secondary, especially as it looks like Will Johnson is probably going to be out for the game. Not ideal, but if we can pressure Howard, get some stops on the defensive front, I think we can keep it competitive, and then we just got to run the ball. One of the biggest problems I've had with Michigan's play calling this season is I think we have really underutilized Khalil Mullings. Every time he gets the ball, he just runs so hard, and it's been a bit of a head scratcher to me why we've seen, no offense to Don, he's done great things for the program, certainly even great things at the shoe against Ohio State, but he just is not looking like the same level of running back as Khalil Mullings. So we're going to have to see a lot more Khalil Mullings, and the O-line is going to have to have its best game ever, because this Ohio State defensive front is no joke. Those guys are monsters, and they're going to be so hungry. I had nightmares watching what they did to Curtis Rourke last week.
Was that?
The O-line is going to have to show up and show out. And I think we're going to have to run the ball. And then finally, I think we are going to need Jim Knowles to treat Davis Warren like he did J.J. McCarthy in 2022, where he dared him to throw. The difference is we're going to need Davis Warren to be able to do it. JJ in that situation answered the call and really exploited Ohio State stacking the box. Warren's going to need to do the same if we want to keep it competitive and have a shot of winning.
Yep, they played a lot of man coverage in that Oregon game. I know that's not obviously Michigan's offense and Oregon offense are two different things, but you could see if they did it in that game, they're very likely going to do it against Michigan and make them throw the ball. I tried, because you're a Michigan fan, I went down and tried to make a case for Michigan, and then I weirdly started to believe they might actually have some sort of a shot.
I believe every single year. It is a blessing or a curse, but hey, I believe.
The last couple of years it's worked out well for you. We'll see Saturday, but this is what I wrote down. I said, I agree. I thought they had nothing to lose, and Ohio State has everything to lose. That's point number one. Point number two, as good as Ohio State's defense has looked the last 5 games, and they have looked really good since that Oregon game. I think they're giving up like 10.5 points a game since that matchup. As good as they've looked, the offense has not looked nearly as good. And if you look, like even last week against Indiana drops a punt on the 2-yard line, and they run it in for a touchdown. There was Caleb Downs had a 65-yard punt return for a touchdown. So you look at the number, they scored 38, but 14 of those were off special teams and defense. So
listen, I'm no Buckeyes homer, but they also got stuffed on the 1 and threw a pick inside the 5. So it kind of all even.
For some reason, rooting against Indiana in that game. I don't know why.
No. Well, first of all, because I just need the Big Ten, and I hate to say this, it's a little bit. I need them to come back down to reality a little bit. Indiana's a fine football team. They're not that good of a football team. Ohio State in this game, I kind of agree with you. I don't think this is going to be. I don't think they're going to blow them out. I think Michigan's playing a little bit better. I think you're going to see. I think Ohio State's going to win this game from anywhere from 14 to 17. I don't think they're going to cover the number against Michigan. But let's just really talk about the big win this week for Michigan, that Larry Ellison's wife and Dave Portnoy went out and paid the number 1 quarterback in the country and said, yeah, we'll spend whatever we want. But the best is when Dave was talking about it, and he's like, yeah, these boosters, they kept telling me, hey, we need you to take this phone call. We need you to take this phone call. He's like, what the hell are they talking about? Like, I don't take phone calls. Like, what are they? Like, no, it's Larry Ellison's wife, and she went to Michigan, this and that and the other. And he's like, oh, like the Larry Ellison that started Oracle? And he's like, okay, yeah, I'll take that phone call. We get on the phone, and he's like, and Dave goes, yeah, she told me all I needed was somebody else to come out with passion like you and say you would pay whatever for wins. And so they got together. They got Underwood on the phone, his parents on the phone, and it's like, he's committed to Michigan now. And the funniest thing is Dave was talking about this, and he's like telling I forget Larry Ellison's wife's name, but on the phone they're texting, and he's like, they're not giving you any of the credit. You deserve at least half the credit, because I think they went like 50-50 on it. And she's like, I don't care. I just want to beat the shit out of Ohio State and win national championships or something. I was like, this lady sounds great.
I don't need credit. I need to stack
championship. Yeah.
Like, my girl. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the real story this week.
How much did they actually pay him to get him to flip? Is there a number disclosed?
I don't think there's a public number yet. Michelle might know, but she follows Michigan more than me. I haven't seen a number.
I think rumors suggest that it's over $10.5 million.
For like a 3-year commitment, $10.5 million.
I think 3 to 4, but then I think there's some kickers in there. I think he's going to have a partnership with Barstool. They're going to do some merch that's probably also going to be extremely lucrative for him. And that's just right now, right? This is not like the local car dealerships. They're going to hook him up, and like everyone else in Ann Arbor who is going to want their name on this just massive 5-star recruit. So,
and I really
want to keep Bryce Underwood.
And I really don't. Yeah, listen, the one thing I do know with recruiting as following college football is he looks great right now. Who knows how he's going to pan out? I think he's going to be good. But the funniest thing is, and all I really care about is the look. I wish I could have saw Brian Kelly's face when he decommitted from LSU to go to Michigan. That's all I care about. I don't care that he's going to Michigan. But Brian Kelly, the fact that we didn't hear that he went down with the stroke, because he runs hot. You can look at his face, and he's got some high blood pressure. So the fact that I'm glad that he's alive and well, but I wish I could have seen the look on his stupid face that he lost his prize recruit.
I mean, like, thoughts and prayers to Brian Kelly's cardiologist having to deal with the loss of Bryce Underwood and the laws to Florida.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh my
God. We don't have to spend more time on this, but it does bring up the one thing. And like I'm totally with Turner. I'm not a Brian Kelly guy, so this is hilarious. But in general, I do think it brings up the point of, like, we're going to have some sort of rules at some point here where it's like, if you commit somewhere for an amount of money, like, at what point is there a contract needing to be signed? Because didn't he commit to LSU for $5 million or something along those lines, but never signed anything?
Yeah, there's just no formal contracts at this point. That's the deal. Matthew was saying it. Sam Houston State is like, listen, the universities, when we bring these kids in, we have to be committed to them, but they don't have to be committed to us. They can go do whatever the hell they want. So they have to figure it out.
I think they need to have some sort of, like, at least where they're not committing 3 different times, or like they've committed and we're still recruiting them. Like, that's odd to me. I don't know. I just think they need some sort of rules, and they haven't done anything about it at this point. let's
Yeah, I mean we've won.
NCAA, who is the only organization that's in a position to provide meaningful regulations to this, and has done nothing but get their ass kicked in federal court for antitrust violations, and just has watched the landscape become the Wild West without any meaningful intervention. I mean, this is a whole separate 3-hour podcast that I can
100%. It is.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that you couldn't get a free cheeseburger. Okay, you would have got suspended the game for a booster buying you a cheeseburger in the airport. Yeah, whatever the hell it is. So then now we have Barstool's owner and Larry Ellison's wife who want to give you $10.5 million. And it's like, okay, great. Perfect.
Let's dive in. Let's go to the next game real quick. It's Tennessee traveling to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt. I think that's the next one on there. And look, this is essentially a similar spot for Vandy as it was for Michigan. They're trying to play spoiler here. Tennessee's not playing to go to an SEC title, but I think we all kind of agree that if Tennessee wins this game, they're in the playoff. And like to Michelle's point earlier, this is not the Vandy of the last decade. This is a much better football team than people realize if they haven't watched them this year. Obviously, they have the signature win over Alabama, but they've been up and down. They upset Virginia Tech as a double-digit favorite week 1. Then they lose to Georgia State on the road. Then they go beat Alabama and win 3 of the next 4. Play Texas really close. They got stomped by South Carolina a couple weeks ago. Lost under the lights at Tiger Stadium last week, which is nothing to turn your head about. And now got a chance with their arch rival, who they never have a shot to beat. And they do this year. Can the Commodores, who is, by the way, our producer of this show, is a huge Vanderbilt fan, went to Tennessee.
Graduated from Tennessee.
Makes no sense.
Graduated from Tennessee.
Makes no sense. Graduated from Tennessee. Can't stand the Vols.
Well, his dad went to Vandy, so that's the deal. But yeah.
It's still like it's wild. Anyway, do the Commodores have a shot of pulling this upset here?
Of course they have a shot at pulling the upset.
Love it.
I love it. No, they are a live home dog. Diego Pavia got a message from God, you guys. He is supposed to be in this spot. No, I think they believe. And why shouldn't they? They have already done, what many believed was impossible when they beat Alabama, including Nick Saban that very morning when he said any SEC game is a hard game except for Vandy. We just need we need Josh Heupel to say something similar that morning, and then who knows? No, I think of course it's possible. I think it's unlikely. I think Bama was not in the right frame of mind going into that game. I really think they slept on it to their detriment, and I think Vandy made him pay. I think the spread is too big. I think they're like 11.5 point home dogs.
Yep.
That spread is too big given Vandy's capabilities this season and the fact that Tennessee is beatable, as we've seen. Tennessee is not a perfect team, not anywhere close to it. But I do think Tennessee can escape with a W. I think they're going to be more focused. They're not going to make the same mistakes Alabama did. I think generally they have the caliber of athlete to out-physical Vandy. But they have to stay focused, right? And that was the one mistake I think Alabama made until it was too late.
Yes, yeah, they turned it on. They were already in a hole and trying to work their way back. I agree. I mean, this is the perfect spot for Vanderbilt. You look at it, they like in double-digit dog roll, they thrive, right? 18.5 point dogs against Texas, darn near one outright covered easily. 23.5 point dogs against Alabama, one at home. It were 14-point dogs against Kentucky, which is a whole nother debate. Like, I don't know how that was.
By the way, that was the worst line. That was easily, me and you saw that. That was like, I don't gamble anymore. We saw that, and I was like, that is easily the worst line in college football all year. Kentucky had already showed
Auburn.
They were a 7-point dog against Auburn at home.
I bet that money line and won.
Yes,
yeah.
Because I saw that coming a mile away.
So did I.
But yeah,
I think every single week that Vanderbilt's been a touchdown dog or more, I have given them out as a best bet, and I think I'm 5-0 against the spread with that. Like this is their type of game, and you add in the fact that it is Tennessee, right? Like matchup wise, you could, I'm sure people can make an argument for Tennessee being 10 points better, maybe like directly on paper, but I'm not looking at that. I do think that is one key is Diego Pavia has to have a little bit of time to throw the ball. Their offensive line has not been very good this year, and Tennessee's front is very, very good. They've got some NFL caliber guys down on that front, and it's not going to be easy. And if you look at Vanderbilt, like it's interesting though. Even the last couple weeks when they lost, they were real aggressive early. They took shots early, scored super early, and kind of got conservative. I think they need to be aggressive from the jump and keep their foot on the gas, because if Tennessee tends to get nervous, we saw it with Arkansas. If you get them to the fourth quarter and it's close, they start to get nervous. They should have lost to Florida. If Billy Napier would have gone for 2, they probably would have lost that game. So if you can get Tennessee in a game where it's tight late, and it's this rivalry game, and you're going to get the Diego Pavia magic where everybody on that field starts to believe because he does, then things are going to get real interesting. I'm going to pick Vanderbilt to win this game. I really am. I said this. I've been saying it for 3 weeks.
Wow.
Right, Turner? I've been saying this for 3 weeks. I think Vanderbilt is going to beat Tennessee in the last game of the season and knock them out of the playoffs. So I'm going with Commodores. I think they win it on a walk-off field goal. Give me the Commodores winning it 30-27 is my final.
Ooh, that's a lot of points. Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a close game. I think that the line is too much, like both y'all said. I think it should be more like an even 7 or an odd 7, but a 7-point line. Man, I just don't know if I could. I don't know if I'd enjoy seeing Bailey that happy with Vanderbilt beating Tennessee.
Come on.
I'm just kidding. But I do ultimately. I do think it's a. I know. Oh, is he going? Yeah. Ultimately, yeah. I think it's a very close game. I think. Man, I don't. Yeah, I'll just for entertainment's sake, I'll pick against you. I'll take Tennessee by a field goal. I think it's a close game. I think Vandy. Man, Tennessee's defense is better than they usually are. They got a good defense. They got a good. They got a good. They got a good front. They got a good front 7. They're a solid defense. I think it's going to be tough sledding for Vandy. You know, they run the ball the majority of the time. Obviously, I think it's going to be tough for them running the ball. But I expect a close game. I'm going to take Tennessee in a close game.
Okay. So we got one more game here on the docket. I had South Carolina at Clemson. Is that what I said? That's what I sent you, right, Michelle?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Yep. So South Carolina, 3 losses. Some people I don't believe this whatsoever. And we've already talked playoff, but some people on the playoff committee last night were trying to say, or on ESPN were trying to say, like, yeah, what the winner of this game could get in the playoff. And there's no way South Carolina could ever get in here because they lost to Bama and Ole Miss, who are both in front of them. I don't know that it's possible to even consider them getting in. Regardless, it's a rivalry game, and Clemson believes they have something to play for. They might, depending on how it plays out, could get into the ACC title game, could possibly sneak in the playoff here, but they have stepped up in class a couple times this year, and it's not ended well. Got stomped by Georgia game 1 and got stomped by a not great Louisville team at home earlier this year. So it's a 2.5-point spread. Who do you like in this one?
I love South Carolina. Love them. Like I said earlier, they are peaking late.
Yep.
But they look so good. If you watched that A&M game, which it sounds like you did because you guys hate A&M, you probably remember it vividly. I do. Like, they just look so good. Like, Lenora Sellers keeps getting better and better and better. Rocket Sanders is running really well. And I just do not trust this Clemson defense to be able to contain them. I don't think they can. Look, if you look, they let Citadel put up over 300 yards on the ground.
That's crazy.
Citadel. That does not bode
That's
well.
what the Citadel does, baby. Triple option attack coming from everywhere. But no, you're right. That's a lot of yards from the Citadel.
Triple hundo. Like,
no, that's funny.
That does not bode well for a South Carolina team that is aggressive. And you know what? Lenora Sellers is not just running the ball well. I think he, in their last performance, put up 300 yards through the air, too.
Great point. Yep.
Like, this is not a good spot for Clemson. I'm going to eat my words here, but I would be surprised if this game does not go South Carolina's way.
Yeah, I was surprised that this line, it was 2.5. Now I see it now on ESPN at 3 even money. I thought this would be a pick 'em at the very least. I get that it's at Clemson and that's a tough place to play. This game is an 11 a.m. kickoff. It's not at night. Look, South Carolina, you nailed it. You nailed it on the head, right? Like I had a best bet on South Carolina in that A&M game. So yeah, I watched that start to finish, and Lenora Sellers was awesome. Rocket Sanders was awesome. And like you said, Lenora Sellers, I kind of thought from what I had seen early in the year that if he could just do enough with his arm, they'll be okay because he's mostly a runner. But he's shown, like you said, he can throw the ball, and they've got some athletes on the outside. And then you look at their defense. The front of that defense is, I mean, it's up there, top 3 in the SEC. They are phenomenal up front. One of the best in the country. They've got some dudes up there. And like I kind of touched on a second ago, Clemson, when they've stepped up in class, they've really played almost nobody except for Georgia. And I don't even find Louisville to be that good of a team. And, they outscored Louisville 14-7 in the fourth just to make the score look respectable. I think at one point it was like 33-10 it was bad. It was an ugly, ugly loss at home. I love it. I think you're spot on. I'm going with South Carolina here. I think they win it outright by a touchdown. Turner?
Yeah, I think South Carolina wins the game too. So they're going to lose at this point if we're all 3 on South Carolina. But yeah, I think they're going to win the game. I think they're just a better football team. It's as simple as that. They're better up front on the defense side of the ball. I'm not a Cade Klubnik guy. I don't think he's very good. That's talk about the worst 5-star class ever. Klubnik, Wegman, and DJ all in the same class, brutal. All 5 stars. Yeah, brutal. Yeah. Doesn't get any worse than that. So I don't want to rain on the Underwood parade, but you never know.
What class? Yeah, what class was that?
Shit. Was it how many years ago was that now? 4 years?
Third year?
Wasn't it DJ Wegman and him? I thought they were all in the same class.
I think JJ McCarthy might have been in that class.
Oh,
could have been.
Was he a 5-star?
He was.
Who?
Oh, he was a 5-star. I don't know if he was then, because I remember us looking it up and being like, all the 5-stars this year ended up being horrible. So
maybe he was on the border, but like he did a little bit better than those guys. He did get a national title. But...
No, he's way better. He's way better.
No, I like DJ just absolutely crapped the bet. I mean, the other names you listed have been true disappointments.
Yes, horrible. I mean, Wegman lost his job to like a kid. What is I didn't even know who Marcel Reed was going into this season. I mean, it's ugly, but
DJ needs to try to go play baseball at this point. He's a good baseball player.
Oh, is he?
Got to get out there and yeah.
Okay, Michelle, I know you're busy, so I'll give you one more question and I'll let you get out of here. So if you had to pick a national title, I know we talked about this last time. If you had to pick a national champion right now, are you? I think you said Oregon last time. Are you sticking to that?
Definitely sticking to Oregon. Although I do not like the way that they've positioned Oregon in the brackets. I think right now, as it looks, they're going to have to play like the winner of Georgia or Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. Like Ohio State has an easier path, which I think is total garbage. But notwithstanding that, Oregon continues to look like the most complete team. I hope the playoff committee treats them favorably when it comes to seeding, regardless of the outcome of the Big Ten championship game. Continue to pick Oregon.
Do you think? I agree with you. They look like the most complete team. Do you think that they should reseed for that purpose of like the number 1 seed gets the highest remaining seed or the worst remaining team in the field and so forth, the way the NFL kind of does? Do you think they should do that?
Definitely. Yeah. What about you guys?
I agree. I agree completely. I would do that. I don't see why you wouldn't do that. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to just be like, well, we'll just keep it this way so it's a standard bracket. Who cares? Just move it around. If you're going to earn the number 1 seed, like especially this year, like Oregon, if they win out, they're going to be the only undefeated team left. And it's like they're going to get penalized and play one of the best teams in the SEC in the second round. That it's just like, that's brutal. They should be playing like if Arizona State sneaks in at the 12, it's a Big 12 champ or whoever, Boise State, whatever, whoever sneaks in, that's who they should play. Whoever's that lowest seed, I think they reseed for sure.
Yeah, especially with the 12-team playoff, it's easy to do. I mean, once you make it to 8, just reseed it and then play it from that point. I mean, like FCS is 24 teams, right? So it'd be hard to bounce people. They're not going to do that in FCS. But with 12 teams, with the 4 teams getting buys, I think you could do it pretty easy with the reseeding after each round. But I know you didn't ask me, but my national championship team is the Ohio State University.
I don't care about your national championship team. I don't care at all.
Yeah, I know.
Now, if there's one thing I've learned from the playoff committee in these past few years is that they make their own rules. So
yeah, that's true. Very good point. Very good point.
Yep.
They showed us that last year. They do not care. They'll do whatever they want. So unfortunately, that's probably going to bode poorly for SMU if they lose. It's going to bode well for Alabama and maybe for Clemson. So we'll see how it plays out. It's going to be interesting. Got a lot of good college football left. Michelle, thank you once again for joining us. We very much appreciate it. You're welcome on the show anytime, as I've already said. We'll put your Twitter information below and everything on the tag in the description. So thank everybody for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe.
Thanks,
Check
Michelle.
out and we will catch you guys next week.
thank you guys so much. Have a great weekend of college football. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Bye, guys.
Thanksgiving.